I froze outside the conference room door, files clutched to my chest. Philip's voice boomed, unmistakably heated. "Don't you dare! You don't get to take credit for Martha's work again." The words hit me like a wave. My heart skipped a beat, and the familiar knot of anxiety twisted painfully in my stomach. Not again, I thought. Not here. Not now. Danielle's voice, eerily calm, cut through the tension. "You have no idea what you're talking about." I could almost feel her eyes boring into Philip's back as she spoke, the tone of her words as sharp as the tailored lines of her suit. I took a deep breath, the air thick with the weight of years spent fighting in this company. With a steady hand, I pushed open the door. Both of them turned to look at me, and for a moment, time seemed to stretch. Philip, my loyal but often brash teammate, stood with his perpetually rumpled blazer. His gaze was hard, but there was something almost pleading in his eyes. Beside him, Danielle Fulton, our newly promoted vice president of sales, stood perfectly poised. Her suit, unquestionably tailored, seemed almost too flawless, as if it were designed to make people like me feel small. "Martha, perfect timing," Philip said, relief flooding his voice, as though my presence could somehow absolve the tension in the room. "Tell Danielle who actually created the pitch deck for Synex." I didn't flinch, didn't move an inch. "I'm Martha Ellison," I thought, "and I'll be damned if I let anyone erase my work again." I met Danielle's gaze without flinching. The weight of the years spent clawing my way from junior sales associate to business development manager, pressed heavily on my shoulders, but I stood firm. The diploma from Ohio University in my cubicle was no Harvard or Stanford, and Danielle made sure I knew it every chance she got. But I'd built this with grit and sweat, and she won't take this from me. I opened my mouth. "Actually, Danielle, the presentation is already finalized. The entire deck is built around the customized supply chain solution I developed specifically for their multimodal needs." The air in the room tightened. Danielle's face didn't change, but I could see the subtle flicker in her eyes, a tightening of her jaw. "Well, I'll need to review it thoroughly." Her smile was tight, as though she were trying to keep her composure. "We can't risk losing this deal. It would be our largest contract ever, $50 million over 5 years. I nodded. "I know," I thought, though I didn't say it. What I didn't say was that I had sacrificed everything to get here. Countless early mornings, late nights, weekends spent working through solutions for Synex Holdings. I'd flown to their headquarters in Detroit 4 times. Each trip had brought me closer to securing the deal that could change everything for me. And now, Danielle, who had only been here for a year, was trying to erase my role in this victory. She would have to try harder. As Philip and I walked back to our desks, he leaned over. "She's going to try to push you out of the final meeting. You know that, right?" I sighed, the weight of the day pressing in on me. "Let her try. Tasha Brennan won't sign anything unless I'm in that room." What Danielle didn't know, what nobody at Orion Tech knew, was that Tasha, CEO of Synex Holdings, had been my college roommate. We'd shared a cramped apartment for 2 years, surviving on ramen noodles and late-night study sessions. We'd laughed, cried, and pulled each other through. But that was something I had never mentioned at work. To do so would have been unprofessional, even though it certainly gave me a foot in the door. As I made my way back to my desk, a new email popped up, an invitation to tomorrow's executive meeting. My stomach churned, a chill running down my spine. Something told me this wasn't about a promotion. The executive boardroom, cold, polished, distant, always made me uncomfortable. I was the only one without an Ivy League pedigree, the only one whose diploma wasn't embroidered with the names of the elite. I smoothed my department store blazer, wishing it weren't so cheap-looking under the harsh fluorescent lights. I took a seat at the far end of the gleaming mahogany table, acutely aware of the men surrounding me. All navy suits, all the same. All the same words, all the same faces. Jonathan Pierce, our CEO, sat at the head of the table, his unreadable expression behind steel-rimmed glasses. Beside him, Danielle, a portfolio open in front of her. The others, 3 men, wore expressions of silent judgment, their eyes flicking from one page to the next. "Martha, thank you for joining us." Jonathan's voice sliced through the tension, cool and detached. "Danielle tells me you've made significant progress with Sinex Holdings." I nodded, my pulse steady, even as my mind raced. "Yes, we're in the final stages. They've verbally committed to the full package, and we're scheduled to sign next week. $50 million over 5 years with an option to renew." Jonathan leaned forward, his fingers steepled, like a chess player preparing for his next move. "That's excellent work. It would be the largest contract in Orion Tech's history." I allowed myself a small smile. "Thank you. It's been a team effort, but yes, I'm proud of where we've landed." Danielle interjected, her voice smooth as glass. "The thing is, we're concerned about Sinex's enterprise-level needs moving forward." I frowned, my mind flashing back to every detail I'd worked so hard to understand. "I've built the entire proposal around their enterprise infrastructure. The implementation plan addresses every concern their IT department raised. Not just the technical aspects," Danielle continued smoothly. "The relationship management. A client of this size requires a certain level of finesse." And just like that, she was trying to take it from me again. But I was done letting that happen. My stomach dropped, the weight of the moment sinking in like a stone. "I've seen this before," I thought. Danielle positioning herself to take over after I've done all the heavy lifting. But never like this. Never with a client this significant. This was the moment I had been dreading. The moment where the line between professional courtesy and manipulation blurred into something far uglier. I said it carefully, forcing my voice to stay level. "I've been managing the relationship for nearly a year. Tasha, Ms. Brennan, has specifically requested that I oversee the implementation." The words left my mouth with more authority than I felt. This wasn't just about the work anymore. It was about the trust that had been built. Trust I had worked so damn hard for. Danielle's smile was razor sharp, but it never reached her eyes. "Of course, you've done excellent foundational work, Martha. No one's disputing that." I could feel the tension rising as I watched the executives exchange glances, quick, calculated glances. Jonathan, his gaze shifting uncomfortably around the room, avoided meeting my eyes. "But we need to ensure this flagship account receives our most experienced talent." Her words hit like a slap. "I'll be taking point on the final negotiations and signing." The weight of her voice made my stomach churn. 6 years of loyalty, countless weekends sacrificed, the biggest deal in company history. I had poured everything into this deal, and here they were, pushing me aside at the very finish line. "Is there a concern with my performance?" The question slipped from my lips before I could stop it, direct, unflinching. Jonathan finally looked at me, and I could see it in his eyes. There was no more room for negotiation. "Not at all. You've exceeded expectations, but as we grow, we need to consider the image we project to high-value clients." My breath caught. "You mean you need people with fancier diplomas?" The words tasted bitter on my tongue. His expression tightened, the faintest flicker of discomfort crossing his face. "We need people with elite educational backgrounds and enterprise experience, moving forward." His gaze flickered down briefly, like an afterthought, to the Ohio University degree that had once hung proudly on my wall. I clenched my fists under the table, the sting of the moment almost unbearable. Results no longer mattered. They never did they? Danielle leaned in, her voice smooth, too smooth. "We're prepared to offer a generous severance package, 3 months' salary and benefits, plus a letter of recommendation." She said it as though it were an offer too good to refuse, but I couldn't swallow the poison behind her words. How thoughtful, I replied, the bitterness leaking into my voice. My face flushed with anger, humiliation. 6 years of blood, sweat, and sleepless nights reduced to a check and a piece of paper. The HR head, a woman I barely knew, slid the manila folder toward me. All the details are in here. We'll need your badge and laptop before you leave today. Her words felt rehearsed, sterile. I looked around the room, my eyes searching for any sign of regret, any hint that they saw me, that they saw what I had built. There was nothing, just discomfort at the task and eagerness to move on. Thank you for the opportunity, I said, the words sounding hollow, even to me. I stood up, my legs unsteady beneath me, and gathered my things as gracefully as I could. There was no dramatic speech, no tear-filled plea, just a quiet, dignified exit. I took the folder, nodded stiffly, and walked out of the room. As I packed up my cubicle, I felt the sting of each item I took with me. The framed photo of my team at the last company retreat, the empty mug I'd left on my desk, and the thought, one that I couldn't shake. I gave them everything, and they tossed me aside like it meant nothing. The doors to the elevator closed behind me with a finality that left my chest tight. I wasn't sure where I was going, but I knew one thing. I wasn't done. Philip hovered nearby, his face a mask of outrage and sympathy. This is insane. After everything you've done? After Synex? His words trailed off, heavy with disbelief. I carefully wrapped my Ohio University diploma in tissue paper, its corners folding under my fingers like the closing of a chapter. It's fine, Philip, I said, my voice calm, though I could feel the weight of the day pressing against me. Really? It's not fine. He shook his head, eyes wide with indignation. You landed a $50 million deal, and they fire you before the ink is dry. You should fight this. I looked at him, the strange calm settling over me, an unsettling peace in the midst of the storm. They've made their choice, I said, my voice steady. And on Monday morning, they're going to realize it was the wrong one. His eyebrows furrowed. What do you mean? I smiled slightly, the corners of my lips barely lifting as I closed the box containing my life at Orion Tech. Just wait and see. Monday morning, 9:30 a.m. I was sitting in my apartment, yoga pants, coffee in hand, scrolling through job listings on my phone when it lit up with a message from Tasha. About to head into the Lion's Den. Wish you were here. Brunch this weekend to celebrate? I smiled, typing back quickly. Absolutely. Good luck today. Call me after. What Tasha didn't know, what I hadn't told her, was that I wouldn't be in the meeting. I hadn't mentioned my termination during our brief weekend call. Some might call it calculating, but I preferred to think of it as letting events unfold naturally, without interference. The phone buzzed again, almost immediately with Tasha's reply. Of course, can't wait to work with you on this. I set my phone down, trying to ignore the twisted knot in my stomach. Part of me felt guilty for not warning her, but a larger part of me wanted Orion Tech to feel the full weight of their decision. Across town, in the gleaming Orion Tech conference room, Danielle Fulton would be arranging presentation materials, ensuring everything was perfect for the most important signing in company history. Jonathan would be there too, no doubt, ready to take credit for the deal. They'd be smiling, confident, unaware of the tsunami that was about to hit them. At 10:15 a.m., my phone rang. Philip's name flashed on the screen. Martha, oh my God, he said the moment I answered. You are not going to believe what just happened. Try me, I replied, setting my coffee mug down, my pulse quickening. Tasha Brennan walked into the conference room, looked around, and the first thing she said was, Where's Martha? I closed my eyes, picturing the scene in my mind. What did Jonathan do? He started doing damage control, Philip said, voice tinged with disbelief. Talking about team approaches, how they value your contribution but are moving in a strategic direction. Complete bullshit. I could hear the vindictive smile in his voice. Brennan wasn't having it. She said she'd been clear from the beginning that you were the reason Synex was considering Orion Tech, and without you, the deal needs to be reevaluated. I allowed myself a small, silent laugh, imagining Danielle's face as her victory crumbled. Then what happened? They're in Jonathan's office now. It's chaos here, Martha. Absolute chaos. Danielle's practically having a meltdown. She's been calling legal to see if there's any way to force Synex to honor the verbal agreement. There isn't, he said simply. I made sure the formal agreement wasn't signed before my departure. How did you know this would happen? Philip asked, his voice filled with awe. I hesitated for a moment, then decided he deserved the truth. Tasha was my college roommate. We've been friends for over a decade. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. And Orion Tech had no idea. His voice was full of wonder. They never asked. They saw your state school diploma and assumed I couldn't possibly have valuable connections. So, what happens now? It was the question I'd been wrestling with all weekend. Part of me wanted to watch Orion Tech implode without the Synex deal. Another part, the professional who'd given 6 years to this company, couldn't completely abandon ship. That depends on what they do next, I replied, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. I didn't have to wait long to find out. Within the hour, my phone was blowing up. 3 missed calls from Danielle, 2 from Jonathan, a text message from an unknown number that turned out to be the head of HR. All of them laced with increasing levels of panic and forced politeness. I let them stew for another hour before finally answering Jonathan's 4th call. Martha. His voice was a little too relieved. We need to talk. I'm listening, I replied, keeping my tone as neutral as possible. There seems to have been a misunderstanding with Synex, Jonathan began. Ms. Brennan is under the impression that you're essential to the deal. That's not a misunderstanding, Jonathan. That's a fact. The line went silent. The pause stretched too long. I could almost hear him grasping for the right words, knowing there was no way out of this. Martha, He started again, but I didn't need him to finish. I already knew exactly what was coming next. I could almost see Jonathan removing his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose the way he always did when negotiations weren't going his way. His voice finally cracked through the silence. Perhaps we acted hastily on Friday, he said, the words lacking their usual confidence. We'd like to discuss bringing you back to oversee the Synex implementation. I couldn't help it. I laughed, a bitter, short laugh that rang too loud in the phone's speaker. You fired me 3 days ago because I don't have an Ivy League degree. Now you want me back because you're about to lose $50 million. That's not, he began, but I cut him off, my voice sharp. It is exactly what happened, Jonathan. Let's not pretend otherwise. There was another long pause. I could feel the weight of the words between us, heavy and suffocating. What would it take, Martha, to come back and salvage this deal? Jonathan's voice was quieter now, more pleading, as though I were the only lifeline left. I'd spent the weekend considering this very question. At first, driven by a mix of hurt and anger, I'd imagined demanding an outrageous salary, perhaps even Danielle's job, maybe public apologies. But as the initial sting faded, clarity emerged. I didn't want to return to a company that had discarded me so easily. No amount of money or title could fix that. Broken trust could never be mended. I replied simply, my voice steady. I'm not interested in coming back. Jonathan's tone grew insistent. Everyone has a price. Name yours. Vice President. Title? Equity? Both. I could feel his desperation. but I wasn't swayed. This isn't about money or titles. This is about respect. You showed me exactly how much you value my contributions on Friday afternoon. There was a shift in his voice then, a subtle crack in the executive polish. I admit we handled the transition poorly. Transition? I interrupted, my voice rising despite my best efforts to remain calm. You fired me days before closing the biggest deal in company history because my diploma didn't have enough ivy on it. That's not a transition, Jonathan. That's elitism, plain and simple. And the line went silent, but I could almost hear the gears turning in Jonathan's head, trying to spin some new narrative. When he finally spoke, his voice lacked its usual authority. Tasha Brennan is threatening to walk. We're talking about $50 million, Martha. The board is having an emergency meeting this afternoon. I didn't even flinch. That sounds like a problem for you and Danielle to solve with your elite degrees. Please. I let the last word hang in the air, sharper than I intended. I was startled to hear actual desperation in his voice. Just come to a meeting. Name your terms, whatever you want. I thought about Tasha sitting in that conference room, defending me when I wasn't there to defend myself. I thought about all the late nights I'd worked while Danielle left at 5 sharp. I thought about the subtle digs at my state school education, the promotions that had gone to people with more prestigious pedigrees, the constant need to prove myself over and over again. I'll think about it, I said, not quite ready to close the door completely. But in the meantime, you should know that Tasha has integrity. If she says the deal depends on my involvement, then it does. I hung up before he could respond. My heart was pounding, but I didn't give in to the rush of emotion. My phone rang again immediately, but I let it go to voicemail. A text followed almost instantly from Tasha. These people are unbelievable. They fired you after everything you did to land this account. I'm furious. Call me ASAP. I smiled, despite myself, and called her back. Martha, she exclaimed as soon as she picked up. What the hell happened? Why didn't you tell me they let you go? I wanted to see what they'd say, I admitted, whether they'd own up to it or try to hide it. Well, they tried to spin some garbage about restructuring and strategic vision, she scoffed, but I wasn't buying it. The arrogance of these people. As if I wouldn't notice you were gone. Thank you for standing up for me, I said quietly. You didn't have to do that. Of course I did. You're the only reason we considered Orion Tech in the first place. Their solution isn't even the best on the market, but you convinced me you could make it work for our needs. I hesitated, the next question heavy on my chest. So, what happens now with the contract? Tasha's voice took on a tone I recognized immediately, the sharp, decisive edge that came out when she'd made her mind up. That depends on you. If you want me to walk away from Orion Tech completely, I will, but I have another idea. I sat up straighter, the possibility of something bigger suddenly clicking into place. You remember Gregory Wilson? Tasha asked. He was a year ahead of us, economics major. Vaguely, I replied, trying to place the name. He founded Wilson Enterprise Solutions 5 years ago. They're a direct competitor to Orion Tech, but with a more innovative approach. They've been trying to get a meeting with me for months. My mind immediately began to race. Greg's looking for a new business development director, Tasha continued. Someone who understands logistics software and has connections in the industry. Sound like anyone you know? I leaned forward, the pieces falling into place faster than I could think. You want me to go work for a direct competitor? I asked, my mind already spinning with possibilities. I want you to interview with them, she clarified. What happens after that is up to you and Greg, but yes, if you took the job, and if their solution meets our needs, I'd be very interested in discussing a partnership. Everything clicked. With dizzying speed, I realized what I could do. I could jump to a competitor, bring Sinex with me, show Orion Tech exactly what they'd thrown away. It was the perfect revenge. Professional, clean, and completely ethical. I felt the satisfaction of it settle over me like a weight lifting from my shoulders. Send me Greg's contact information, I decided. I'll reach out today. Already texted it to you, Tasha replied, her voice practically humming with excitement. He's expecting your call. 3 hours later, I sat in a downtown cafe, facing Gregory Wilson, founder and CEO of Wilson Enterprise Solutions. He was younger than I expected, barely 40, with the kind of energetic presence you'd expect from someone who had built something from nothing. His sharp eyes studied me as we exchanged pleasantries. Tasha speaks very highly of you, he said, leaning back in his chair. She says you're the most client-focused person she's ever worked with. I smiled slightly. I believe in relationships over transactions. Technology changes, but trust is constant. The next hour flew by as we discussed his company, my experience, and the logistics software market. Unlike my interviews at Orion Tech years ago, Greg never once asked about my educational background. He was entirely focused on results, strategies, and approaches. Something that felt refreshing, almost liberating. So, here's the situation, Greg said, leaning forward, his tone shifting to business. We're a smaller player than Orion Tech, but we're growing fast. Our technology is superior, more adaptable, cloud-native, better UI. What we lack is someone who can get us in front of the right enterprise clients. Someone with relationships and industry knowledge. I nodded, understanding immediately. Exactly. He didn't waste any time. I'll be blunt, Martha. I want to poach you. I want to offer you our business development director position, reporting directly to me. Full autonomy over your client strategy, equity in the company, and a salary that will make Orion Tech's best offer look insulting. My eyebrows rose at the offer. That's quite a pitch. I believe in investing in talent, Greg shrugged. And from what Tasha tells me, you're exactly the talent we need. The fact that Orion Tech was stupid enough to let you go is their loss and my gain. For the first time since Friday, I felt a genuine smile spread across my face. I like your approach, Greg. When would you need an answer? He asked, a twinkle in his eye. How about right now? He challenged, his smile daring me to take the plunge. I laughed. I appreciate the enthusiasm, but I'll need to see the formal offer first. Though I have to admit, I'm definitely interested. Fair enough, Greg replied. I'll have it to you by end of day. He stood up and extended his hand. I'm looking forward to working together. As we shook hands, my phone buzzed with another call from Jonathan. I silenced it without a second thought. Problem? Greg asked, noticing my gesture. Not anymore, I replied with certainty, a small flicker of satisfaction dancing in my chest. By the time I got home, my phone was blowing up. 7 missed calls from Orion Tech executives, 3 voicemails pleading for a meeting, and an email from Danielle that was almost comically desperate. I deleted them all without hesitation, feeling the weight lift off my shoulders. Then I opened the formal offer Greg had sent over. The compensation package made me gasp. Base salary twice what I'd been making, significant equity, a signing bonus, a relocation allowance if I wanted it. Most importantly, the title and authority I deserved. I signed it immediately and sent it back. Then I called Tasha. It's done, I told her. I start at Wilson next Monday. Perfect, she replied, satisfaction evident in her voice. I just emailed Orion Tech formally withdrawing from contract discussions. How did they take it? Like they'd been hit by a truck, she laughed. Jonathan actually suggested they might take legal action. I snorted. On what grounds? You never signed anything? Exactly what I told him. she said. I also mentioned that we're exploring other options that better align with our strategic direction. Let me guess, you're meeting with Wilson next week? Tuesday morning. I thought you might want to sit in. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months. Wouldn't miss it for the world. The next few months unfolded like a masterclass in professional karma. I started at Wilson Enterprise Solutions the following Monday, diving into my new role with enthusiasm and purpose. Greg gave me the freedom to build my team and strategy from scratch, without the constraints I'd faced at Orion Tech. My first official act as business development director was to prepare for the Synex meeting. When Tuesday arrived, I walked into the conference room with confidence, greeting Tasha with a warm hug before seamlessly transitioning into my presentation. 2 hours later, we had the framework of an agreement, $45 million over 5 years. Slightly less than the Orion Tech deal, but with significantly better technology and implementation support. As the final words were being spoken, I couldn't help but feel a sense of justice. Orion Tech hadn't just lost the deal, they had lost me. And with it, they had underestimated the power of relationships, integrity, and knowing exactly where you belong. Word travels fast in our industry. When news broke that Synex Holdings had signed with Wilson instead of Orion Tech, other clients took notice. My phone began to ring with calls from contacts I'd cultivated over the years, all curious about why I'd made the switch, what Wilson could offer that Orion Tech couldn't. I never spoke ill of my former employer. I didn't have to. The facts spoke for themselves. Orion Tech had fired me immediately after I landed their biggest contract ever, only to lose that same contract when the client found out I was gone. It was a cautionary tale, one that executives whispered about at industry conferences, a story of arrogance and missteps. 3 months into my new role, I received an unexpected LinkedIn message from Philip. Danielle was let go yesterday. The board cited the Synex disaster and failure to retain key talent. Thought you'd want to know. For a moment, satisfaction crept in, but it was quickly followed by concern for my former team. How are things there? I replied. Tense. Stock is down 30% since the Synex news. Rumors of layoffs. I didn't celebrate. Instead, I wrote back to Philip. If you're interested in a change, Wilson is hiring. We value results over pedigree here. 2 weeks later, he joined my team, the first of several talented Orion Tech employees who made the switch over the coming months. They were tired of the politics, the empty promises, and the false meritocracy. They wanted results. They wanted something real. 1 year after my unceremonious firing, Wilson Enterprise Solutions had grown by 150%. Our client roster now included 3 former Orion Tech flagship accounts, including Synex Holdings. My team, now 15 strong and growing, was a diverse mix of backgrounds, educations, and experiences, all united by their drive and client focus. We were building something that mattered, something that couldn't be overlooked. I had just wrapped up our quarterly planning meeting when my assistant called to tell me that Greg wanted to see me. I found him in his office, reviewing financial projections with a satisfied expression. The board meeting went well, I said, taking a seat. Greg looked up, grinning. Extremely well. We're on track to surpass Orion Tech in market share by Q3. That's ahead of projections, I remarked, impressed. It is, and it's largely thanks to you and your team, Greg said, pushing a folder across the desk. That's why I wanted to discuss this with you first. I opened the folder, and inside was a press release draft announcing my promotion to Chief Revenue Officer, effective immediately. My heart skipped a beat. Greg, I don't know what to say, I managed, genuinely surprised. Say yes, he replied, his voice warm with admiration. You've earned it. You've transformed our sales organization, brought in top talent, and landed clients we couldn't even get meetings with before. I smiled, thinking about how different this moment felt from my last executive interaction at Orion Tech. Yes, absolutely yes. As I left Greg's office, I checked my phone and found a text from Tasha. Have you seen the news about Orion Tech? I hadn't. A quick search revealed the headlines. Orion Tech announces strategic restructuring following 4 consecutive quarters of declining revenue. Jonathan Pierce was stepping down as CEO. The company was seeking a buyer. I felt no joy at their downfall, only a quiet, professional vindication. They had valued pedigree over performance, connections over competence, appearances over results. And now, the market had simply corrected their mistake. That evening, as I passed my Ohio University diploma hanging proudly in my new corner office, I smiled. It wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a reminder that success isn't about where you start. It's about where you finish and who you become along the way. I wasn't the one who had to climb the corporate ladder. I'd built my own, and now I was at the top.